For Barley Norton, an Englishman, Vietnam is not a strange word. For years, he has lived in Vietnam for his researches in ethnomusicology. The man has met many Vietnamese artisans and equipped himself a broad knowledge about traditional music, including some, ca trù and chầu văn. And with his researches, Vietnamese traditional music has become more popular not only to the Vietnamese but also people abroad. Hello, welcome to our On the Mic of VTV4. So first, what's your feeling when you come back here to Vietnam?
I'm always very happy to come back to Vietnam and meet old friends and see what's happening in Vietnam, the changes, the cultural changes that are occurring. It's always a very interesting experience for me to come back.
And to begin with, please tell us about your journey to become a lecturer of ethnomusicology.
Ethnomusicology is about the study of music, but it's also about the study of culture and looking at the relationship between music and culture. And I decided to focus on Vietnam, and I studied ca trù and chầu văn, two types of traditional Vietnamese music.
So during your researches, you have been going around the world, but there might be something interesting for you in Vietnam, so that you choose to come to this country.
I remember the first time I heard Vietnamese music was in London. I was listening to a recording of traditional music, ca trù music, by the famous singer Quac Thi Ho. And I heard her recording, and I was intrigued by the sound of her voice, by the sound of the instrument, the lute, the dan dai that was accompanying her voice. So I was very intrigued, but at that time I knew nothing about Vietnamese music. So I decided to come to Vietnam and start studying it.
To complete his researches, Barley talked with many famous Vietnamese artists, get the knowledge from them, and asked them to teach him how to sing and play traditional Vietnamese music. For many times, he has joined other Vietnamese artists in music shows in Vietnam. The move became an encouragement to the preservation of Vietnam's endangered art. It would be great if you could share with us the stories about your researches about the traditional music of Vietnam in the past.
I came to Vietnam in 1994 and I tried to find out about ca trù music. I managed to meet an old lute player, an old dan dai lute player called Chu Van Zu, and I remember going to his house. 2 months I went to his house every day on Cam Tien Street in Hanoi and studied with him. But he was very old, he was in his 90s, and it was very difficult to follow his playing. But the next trip I managed to meet another ca trù group. That was in 1995. I met ca trù Thai Ha, the ca trù Thai Ha ensemble. And I studied with them, and it was much more easy for me to study with them because they were younger musicians and they could explain things more clearly to me. And I also remember going back to Phu Sai, the Phu Sai festival in Nam Ha province in 1995. I didn't know the way to go. I was on a motorbike, but I found it in the end, and there were lots of crowds there, and I was overwhelmed by the festival and the experience of watching Lendong and the rituals there. So I decided for my next project to start studying chầu văn.
Being a foreigner studying the Vietnamese traditional music like some ca trù and even Lindong, which are very difficult to understand. Do you face any challenges back then?
The main challenge for me was Vietnamese language. I mean, it was very difficult to understand some of the very difficult texts, the song texts, the lyrics of songs, and also just interacting with musicians and speaking to them. Another problem with learning Vietnamese music is that it's always taught orally. It's taught from memory, without music notation. Traditionally it is taught like that. And it's always changing. There's a lot of improvisation, so every time you hear a song it's sung differently, which makes it very difficult, even for Vietnamese, but especially for foreigners to learn who sort of aren't familiar with the musical culture.
And when you finish your researches and also your books, do you receive any feedback from the readers?
I published a book on chầu văn and Lendong, on mediumship music, and it's been quite well received. I mean, it's an academic book, so it's mostly for students and other academics, but it's published in America, and it's received quite good reviews.
This is the second time that the film Hanoi Eclipse by Barley Norton is shown in Hanoi. Telling the stories about the contemporary music group Đại Lâm Linh, the film attracts great attention from the audiences. It reflects the view of Barley towards one part of Vietnam music scene.
Tôi không nghĩ là anh Barley khi anh làm cái phim này anh có một cái định hướng
I don't think Barley has a script for this film before he shoots it. He just followed the group everywhere. But when I see it, I can see the portraits of Ngọc Đại, the group, and the music they played during that time.
hình ảnh của anh Ngọc Đại.
I can see through the film the view of Barley, a foreigner towards Ngọc Đại, and the Vietnamese contemporary music. I think he wants to show the world some aspects of Vietnamese contemporary music, and Đại Lâm Linh is one example of that aspect. Using the music of the group and the footage he shot, Barley managed to bring the audiences a glance on the development of contemporary music in Vietnam. And at the same time, the British man shows that his interest in Vietnam could be anything, not only traditional music, but also contemporary music and others. You are funded by the Getty Foundation to do researches on the contemporary experimental performance culture in Vietnam. And a part of that is the film about the group Đại Lâm Linh. Why do you have such an interest in this group?
I decided to make a film about Đại Lâm Linh because they are one of the few groups in Vietnam who are really pushing the boundaries, experimenting with new musical styles, new musical topics. So it seems like a very good topic to address what it's like to be a contemporary musician in Vietnam today. What problems do they have? What difficulties do they have in making new music? And what the reception of that music is like.
And what do you think about the contemporary performance culture in Vietnam so far?
There are lots of talented artists and musicians in Vietnam who are trying to break the boundaries of what's permitted and experiment with new forms of musical expression. But they find it very difficult to exist and to find venues for their music to be performed in. I've met quite a few musicians in Hanoi who are trying very hard to experiment. People like Trần Thị Kim Ngọc, Nhuận Man Hung, or Vũ Nhật Tân. But there are very few Vietnamese venues where this type of music, experimental music, is performed.
And finally, can you reveal some of your plans or researches in Vietnam in the future?
Well, I'm doing a research project on the imperial court music in Hue. And I'd also like to make a film, another documentary film about Ca Chu, the traditional music of Ca Chu.